Hey guys, welcome back to more stories about crazy entitled neighbors. In this video, OP actually gets shot because he changed his own Wi-Fi and Karen insisted that she was entitled to free Wi-Fi. Let's dive right into the stories. And the first one is a beautiful petty revenge neighbor story. It is titled "Neighbor Dishes Out Hell and Receives It Paid Back with Interest." Been living next to R for 20 years. First it started with me coming home to find that he had hooked up an extension cord to one of my exterior outlets and was stealing my electricity. I got a friend who's an electrician, so after the cord was unhooked before I could call the cops on him, I had my electrician pal come over and wire up that receptacle to 240 volts. I never heard any smoke or loud pops and zaps, but I hope he had been stealing my electricity to power something really expensive. He never plugged an extension cord into any of my other outlets again. He also has frequent weird house guests that stay for days/months. I think he lures them over with a free place to stay and possibly drugs and alcohol. We got tired of them wandering over and knocking on our door, always interrupting us and asking for free Wi-Fi, so finally we set up a fake open Wi-Fi network that looks like free Wi-Fi, but when you try to connect to the internet you get redirected and you can only view the infamous "never gonna give you up" music video, but nothing else, so you basically get rickrolled. We got a photo of the singer of that video in a frame with LED lights behind his eyes, and when someone tries to access it, his eyes light up so we know when they are doing it. The rickroll fake Wi-Fi network seems to have stopped the weird people showing up asking to use our Wi-Fi. He also used to cut through the back part of my yard all the time, and one time his dog ran into our yard and attacked my husband while we were doing yard work. So of course animal control got an immediate call and he had to fence in his backyard, which he did a horrible job on, and several times his dog has gotten loose and I caught him waltzing through my backyard walking after it like it was no issue. Last year I expanded our chain link fence all the way out to the property line so he cannot cut through our yard anymore and his dog is better contained. I had built a shed back there and was tired of that being outside the fence anyway. I got a survey and found his bushes were encroaching on my property by quite a large area, so those got trimmed back too. I also put up privacy slats in the fence and I don't know why that bothered him so much, but after living for years with his ugly broken down Bronco parked on his lawn and overhanging the property line in the front, I'm totally at peace with him being ticked off by my new fence while I get the full use of my property now. I also had the new fence expansion put in with a 3 to 4 inch gap at the bottom and our property is raised up above his. For some reason, when the houses were built, his is dug down by about 4 to 5 feet, so as his invasive junk deceased elm tree drops all manner of leaves, dead deceased branches and seeds in my yard, rather than quickly pick it all up like I used to, I just pull out my leaf blower and blow it all under the fence and back into his yard. I xeriscaped my yard, no lawn, and some years back when I was trimming back my large perennials, the wind picked up some of the trimmings and they blew onto his lawn. I found them all thrown unceremoniously up onto my porch. I think of this and smile every time I return all the leaves, dead branches and elm seeds from his tree, and I blow them right into his lawn. Larger branches that I used to put through our big chipper shredder? Nope. Tossed over the fence and on top of his lawn for him to deal with. And by the way, he never trims that tree, it's very large and mostly dead and drops a lot of dead branches constantly. He also burns his fireplace in the summer and burns his trash rather than pay for trash service, which smells horrible and always gives me migraines. Yesterday we stained a bunch of wood. The stains are letting off a ton of vapors in the hot weather today, and I have some big, very powerful fans outside blowing the vapors over in his direction. One of the other neighbors told me he keyed her car once, and when he finally got rid of the Bronco and got himself a shiny new Subaru Impreza, but he was too cheap to pay for full coverage, and some lady broadsided him during a light change, was not deemed at fault for the accident, he said/she said, and several weeks later the car came back drivable but mostly smashed. The deployed airbag still kind of hanging down on the sides. Karma gets credit for that one though. We get along with everyone else in the neighborhood, but this guy, I literally gave away 300+ pounds of fruit off of my trees last year. Peaches, plums, apricots, it was a bumper crop. We've got a snowblower and we help clear sidewalks for a lot of folks too, and I've given away tons of perennials and loaned out garden tools. Well, we are generally overly helpful to everyone else except R. When it comes to him, I'm a petty babe in total control of herself. And yes, he could have had amazing neighbors if he'd been even slightly considerate and been less of a nuisance and not bullied us and stolen from us. It sucks to suck. An edit here, thanks for the idea of aiming the chipper shredder exhaust towards his lawn. It's the big one from Harbor Freight Tools, and if I take the back off, I bet that thing will shoot micro wood particles 10+ feet easily, and lots of them. I will save that as the last nuclear option. Also, thanks for the discussion of the trash burning as a health hazard. I close the windows and thankfully have an arsenal of air purifiers I run on full blast when he does it, but he's breathing these fumes up close and personal. Thinking about this, I'm realizing if I can, I should take out a life insurance policy on him so I can outlive him and get paid for doing so. That would be pro-revenge for all the migraines. Also, correction in the first paragraph, the cord was not unhooked by me. I would have called the cops immediately if I'd found it that way. My ex, who I originally bought the house with, unhooked it and told me about it when I got home, so away went my chance for criminal charges, unfortunately. And yes, that would have been the better and safer solution than a booby-trapped electrical outlet, which for safety purposes, I'm not recommending. And yeah guys, let me know in the comments if you ever had an awful neighbor as bad as this one. And also I'm curious, has anyone ever asked you to share your Wi-Fi with them? I've actually had that happen a few times here in the neighborhood I'm living in, and I always say no. Wi-Fi is just one of the things you don't share, trust me. Also, if you enjoyed the video so far, please don't forget to like the video and post some star emojis if you want to support me. Thank you so much. The title story is titled, "Karen Shot Me Because I Changed My Own Wi-Fi Password." So, for the past couple of years, I've been working as a freelance artist. Specifically, I do portraits of people's pets. It's always been a dream of mine to turn my hobby of painting into my job, and I'm blessed to say that I now have that opportunity. Anyway, I've turned my old office space into my studio, and so I work from home, which is another dream I'm very lucky to have achieved. There's something poetic about spending an entire day in my robe while simultaneously making my living. I sell my work on Etsy as well as some other sources. I consider myself business savvy, and I found ways to increase my productivity and sales. Although I have a decent business head, those skills have not transferred to the digital field. My daughter helps out mostly with the actual selling side. In my opinion, there's far too many buttons on web pages nowadays. So as you can imagine, when I first moved in those few years ago, I installed the new router with the default settings and called it a day. Those default settings included the password, which was set as password, and I figured nobody would bother to use our Wi-Fi, so why bother changing it? As you can see from the title, I was clearly wrong. Lesson learned. Moving on to the subject of this mess though, my neighbor Karen. Karen has lived next door since I moved in and has been an interesting character to say the least. From asking around town, I've been made aware that she's currently unemployed, and when I say currently, she has been for the few years I've been here, and I cannot imagine she has any plans of finding a job soon. She claims benefits. Apparently, she has some sort of condition with her back which prevents her from working, but most of the town have called this a slight exaggeration of her condition. I often see her out front working on some DIY project anyway, so it cannot be that bad. Well, but who am I to decide that? With the ample time Karen has in her day-to-day life, she spends most of it gossiping, being nosy, and just sort of acting like this lurking presence you cannot get rid of. I hate to judge someone like this, but she is just annoying. She will sit on her porch for hours watching as I go and get mail, often calling out random comments like, "Huh, more mail?" in a suspicious tone. I'm frequently leaving large parcels out as well, these being my paintings, which to the average person would look obvious, but apparently not to Karen. "What are those?" she asked one day, frowning as I carried a couple of A4 boxes outside. "Paintings, I sell them online," I replied. "Huh," she huffed. "Must be nice living off the government, huh?" That was a strange one. Well, firstly, because I don't and I happen to make thousands of bucks in my business, but secondly, because I already mentioned that is exactly how she lived. I didn't want to start anything, so I just had it inside without correcting her. That interaction was around a year ago, and whilst we never had any major incidents, there has been similar comments since then. My issue is that after a while I fear I crossed over the time frame to correct her. At this point it might just be too late. So, deciding that life was too short to care, I just let her think whatever. Maybe it makes her feel better about herself. The main issue began a few months ago, when my daughter began complaining that the Wi-Fi was getting slow. I had also noticed this when going on my online stores, but didn't really think much of it. My daughter ended up getting me to log into some admin panel for the Wi-Fi so that we could see what was clogging it up. It was quickly clear that there were several additional devices attached to the Wi-Fi than had been originally connected. There were 6 unknown devices, each of which had Karen somewhere in them, whether it was Karen phone or Karen's TV. I did not really know what that meant, but it was my daughter who explained that basically it meant that she had been freeloading our Wi-Fi. Checking the backlogs, it was clear she had been doing this for months. I tried to say maybe it was an accident, but my daughter assured me it definitely wasn't. This was quite annoying, but I was not overly fussed. I thought that one single conversation would sort it and that it wouldn't turn into a big thing. This was something I was yet again wrong about. Well, after weeks of holding off on the conversation, I decided it was an easier solution to just change the password and reconnect all my devices. I figured there wouldn't have to be an awkward conversation and Karen would not have to feel embarrassed about being caught. Keeping up with the current pattern, this was yet again something I was in the wrong with. Not even an hour after the password was changed, there was banging on my door. "What have you done?" Karen shouted, angrily thrusting her laptop into my face. Squinting at the screen, I saw the text box in the middle reading, "No internet connection." "Sorry?" I asked. "I've been trying to get into the internet for ages. Did you change the password?" She screamed. Yes? Now why on earth would you do something like that? Because it is my Wi-Fi that I pay for. You're endangering my children by changing their password. We cannot afford Wi-Fi and now they cannot access their schoolwork. They're gonna fail and end up homeless. Karen, your children have not even lived with you for years. Your husband has full custody. What on earth was this conversation turning into? Karen's lips drew into a thin line. How dare you bring up my children and personal life? You literally brought them up, not even a beat before. Whatever, what's the new password? Karen sighed, getting ready to type it in. Hang on. I'm not ready. Okay, go. Karen, you're not getting the new password. Karen slowly lifted her head from the keyboard and cocked her brow. What on earth do you mean? I pay for it. Go and buy your own Wi-Fi. I cannot afford it. You're just a leech who lives off the government. The least you could do is give me some Wi-Fi. This conversation went back and forth for the good part of an hour, so I will spare you those details. I hate to admit it, but I ended up getting rather heated myself and was thankful that my daughter was at college during this debate. My final straw came when she spat out, "You don't have a job. I got real things to do with my time, not pretend little art jobs on the internet." I decided to end this argument, lifting my chin and stating calmly, I make more in 1 week than you do in a year. You're the woman leeching off the government. And while you might have them count the same, won't work for me. I slammed the door in her face. That felt good. She stayed outside my house for a while, banging on the door. She even headed back to her house to fetch a lawn chair to prop herself up outside. However, I had paintings to do and a nice loudspeaker, so she was not bothering me by being out there. Another neighbor sent me a photo of her outside, finding it rather hilarious that she was having her own mini protest on my own property. A few hours later, I got another photo. She had fallen asleep in the lawn chair, and I even managed to sneak out, do some shopping, and come back without waking her up. I left a cold beer in her cup holder for effect. As it turns out, that one beer sparked Karen to go around her shop herself and grab a crate. Well, so much for having no money. In the late hours of the night, I headed outside to take out my trash. Almost forgetting that Karen was out there, I managed to get all the way to my trash cans while Karen was just laughing to herself in her chair, drunk out of her mind. I almost thought I might be able to get back inside without causing a scene when she suddenly roused and shouted over at me. It took a while for her words to begin sounding coherent. Most were just mumbles falling out of her mouth. "You," she eventually yelled, standing and swaying from her chair. "I got a problem with you." "Great," I replied. "Give me the password." Karen slurred, raising her voice. "Sorry, neighbors. No, you don't pay for the Wi-Fi. We have discussed this." Each of Karen's responses came out a jumbled mess. I couldn't even tell what she was saying half the time, just assumed it was more of the same. In the midst of our argument, Karen sat back down in her chair for what I assumed was stability or to stop her spinning head. Alas, what she was really doing was sitting down so she was in better reach of what she had tucked just beneath her chair. A gun. I froze as she raised her hand, revealing a pistol that, although small, could certainly do some damage. I counted on her aim being ruined by her alcohol, and thankfully for once I was right. She fired the gun, aiming at my head, and at the last second her arm buckled, and the shot ended up aiming for my foot instead. A bullet went right through my big toe and was agonizing. I remember screaming loudly. It was not the world's worst pain, but my gosh, did it hurt. Karen seemed to sober up quickly after that, stumbling as fast as a drunk woman could to her house. I'm not sure if she thought that would somehow erase what she had done. I limped my way inside with the help of my neighbor, who had come rushing out after hearing the gunshot. Said neighbor stayed with me whilst I called the police. The police arrived with paramedics who began to tend to my toe on site while the police began marking out the crime scene and scanning for Karen. I pointed them in the direction of her home. The police found the shell on the grass, confirming my story, and they also noticed all the empty beer bottles and trash that Karen had left behind, along with her infamous chair. One of the officers marked out the crime scene and took my statement, as well as my neighbors, who had of course heard the gunfire. The other officer went over to Karen's house and after a while of knocking to no response, broke the door down. At this point, both officers headed inside. I heard some shouting coming from inside, along with the sound of glass smashing, and a few moments later Karen was being dragged out of her house by the officers. "You cannot do this," Karen yelled at the officers who didn't so much as bat an eye. "I was sleeping during this whole supposed gunfire." I find that very hard to believe, one of the officers remarked. "Oh yeah? And why is that?" "Well, because we've just found the gun that was used in your house." Wow, did she even bother to hide it? Karen was silent, her mouth opening and closing while she attempted to think of some way to get out of this situation. But alas, there clearly was not an easy exit. Given the evidence against Karen and the fact the paramedics quickly proved I was shot, she was arrested on the spot, but not before kicking up a fuss, of course. "How dare you do this to me? Do you know who I am?" Karen screamed. Karen tried to lunge for me but was quickly held back by the officers. She cussed me out the whole way over to the cop car. "See you in court," I called after her, feeling the need to have the last word. Just before the paramedics took me to the hospital for further treatment of my foot, the cops gave me a court hearing reference to follow up on, claiming although the case may take time to process, a court hearing will still be in order. They also informed me that while I was in the hospital, some other officers would be over to process the crime scene they had taped off just outside my house. When the hearing eventually took place, it went very well in my direction, but how could it not after everything that had gone down? Karen walked into the courtroom nice and calm, smirking at me. But then roughly 10 minutes into the session, she began kicking off. "It's all her fault. She didn't let me use her Wi-Fi." Karen screamed, kicking the table in front of her. "Silence!" the judge yelled before scolding Karen for her disorderly behavior within the courtroom. "I should have shot your head," Karen yelled seconds after the judge's scolding before smacking her hand to her mouth. "One more word," the judge threatened once the astonished gasps around the room had quietened. Karen was wise enough to finally be silent. I stared at her while the judge called out her charges, watching as tears rolled down her cheeks. Even I was flinching as they read out the charges. They seemed to be never-ending, reading each line with precise coldness. Karen ended up getting a few years in prison with the possibility of this being shortened. She was silent as she left, realizing there was no use trying to fight against her punishments. And guys, if you enjoy Karen's getting arrested, please don't forget to post some star emojis in the comments, since that would help me tremendously. And now let's move on to the next story. It starts like this. So I joined the army right out of high school, since I did not think I had the grades or prospects for college. Training was rough, but I made it through. I was on 2 tours, the later one being on the front lines. The full details are not important to this story, but I did lose my left leg, just below the knee, in the line of duty. It is something that I'm still coming to terms with nearly 5 years later. Even with the loss of my leg, I've been trying to keep positive. I was fitted with a prosthetic shortly after my injury, so I've gotten used to walking around with my prosthetic. And by the way, I do need a cane for additional assistance from time to time after a good amount of practice. For a long time I wore long pants to cover up the prosthetic even when it was boiling hot outside, but I was slowly working up to capri and shorter pants as the years went on. Now I've got no issues heading out in public with shorts on, even if I get an odd look or two. I'm proud of the progress I've made. Now onto what happened though. So there's a small coffee shop that I like to visit every Saturday. It is not very busy, so it's usually quiet, and I see it as a nice place to get a pep in my step for the beginning of the weekend. The staff is friendly, the weather was warm, so I was wearing shorts with my leg in full view for anyone to comment on, but the 3 other people in the shop were regulars like me and did not make a fuss. I ordered a coffee and a blueberry muffin and sat down at one of the corner tables to enjoy my food. 2 minutes later, a woman bursts into the shop. I don't recognize her as someone who comes in regularly, but she starts talking like she owns the place. The shop is not small, but with how loud she is speaking, it is easy to hear everything she is saying. She demands a blueberry muffin, and the cashier politely explains that they just ran out of it and would need time to make another batch. The woman, I'm just gonna call her Karen because that's exactly what she was acting like, wanted to know who had the last one, and the cashier gestured to me. Karen's eyes met mine and then her gaze moved down to my leg. Karen, how dare you? Me, excuse me? Karen, you think you're slick or something? The fact that you're flaunting that poor excuse for a pretend leg shows that you're just asking for attention. Me, ma'am, I can assure you that I needed to walk. Karen, I'm sure you can just walk fine without it. At this point, her voice is still carrying through the shop and the rest of the regulars are staring at us. I am embarrassed and wanted to say something that would hopefully get her to stop talking to me, so I decided to just tell her the full truth. Me, ma'am, my leg is missing below the knee. I need this prosthetic to walk. Karen, of course it is. Next thing you will tell me is that you lost it in the war. I could see that she was looking at the shirt I had on, which was a gift from my unit. It had my unit number, the base name I was originally stationed at, and my full title on the back. I like to wear it out because I want people to know that I feel proud to have served my country, and it sometimes provides enough of an explanation for why I have a prosthetic leg. I watched her lips pull into a frown. Karen, you're stealing valor from the men and women who fought for our country. You're wearing that shirt and pretending not to be able to walk just so you can have the special treatment that veterans get. Me, but ma'am, I'm a veteran. Karen, prove it. And by the way, Ripe stars, that veteran should have told Karen to prove that she's actually a human being. I'm not sure if she would have been able to. Anyway, you said your leg is missing, then show it to me. At this point, I was mortified that I couldn't even think of anything more to say. Apparently, Karen took my silence as something else. Before I could even move away, she approached my table and grabbed onto my prosthetic. And the way that it is set up is that there's multiple straps attached high up on my thigh so that my leg won't fall off randomly, so when she pulls it feels like she's attempting to pull my entire leg off. I remember zoning out for a moment, the situation just taking its time to fully register in my head. When Karen pulled at my leg again, my right leg moved on instinct, catching her legs as I kicked out with my foot in an attempt to get her off me. She buckled and knocked her head against a neighboring table on the way down to the floor, letting go of my prosthetic as she lost her balance. She was out cold. I looked around and saw that some of the patrons of the shop were recording on their phones. The cashier at the register had a phone to her ear and I could hear her asking for an ambulance. I sat there for a good minute just trying to get my bearings back. I knew at the time that I probably caused Karen some damage, but I was just defending myself. I figured if there was an ambulance coming, then some police officers would be too. The cashier came over to me after her call and told me that she immediately dialed 911 when Karen went for my leg. She made sure I was okay to stay where I was until the authorities came and sat and talked with me to calm me down. I did not realize how shaken up I was until after everything. One of the other workers checked on Karen just to make sure she was alright, and she regained consciousness just as the ambulance and police arrived. Of course, as soon as the cops walked in the door, Karen immediately started screaming that I had attacked her unprompted. She held where she hit her head, claiming she had a concussion because of me. The officers directed her to one of the EMTs that came in with them, and while one officer went to one side of the restaurant with them, the other came over to me to ask what actually happened. I told the truth, the cashier holding my hand the whole time to keep me calm. I offered the officer my wallet to show him my veteran ID card, still have a physical copy even though they are all digital nowadays, just so he knew that I was telling the truth. The officer understood and thanked me for my service and apologized that someone had done something so horrible to me. Karen decided to chime in that my card had to be fake, there was no way I was a veteran. The officer said that he could remove her from the premises, but if she did attack me first, he would want to see if any of the witnesses corroborated my story. The cashier invited him and the other officer to see the security tapes from the coffee shop's cameras, and the patrons showed that they had recorded the incident on their phones. Karen was quiet at that point, and the police said that they would be going with her to the hospital in order to arrest her for assault. The EMT escorted her out onto a stretcher to be taken to the hospital, and one of the officers hung back to ask me if I wanted to press charges. I said yes, because even before the weeks leading up to the trial, her attack affected me greatly. I got a lawyer the next day, and while I waited for my day in court, I started having nightmares. I dreamt of the day I lost my leg, and instead of experiencing that event again, it was like it merged with Karen trying to rip off my prosthetic. I could feel how tight the straps were against my thigh, how much the area beneath my knee hurt. I would wake up sweating, unsure of where I was for a few moments, and had to find something to help me calm down. I ended up having to see a therapist about it, which I was embarrassed about at first, but the therapist I was set up with helped me come up with ways to cope with this new fear and anxiety I had after I was attacked. My lawyer was amazing and made sure that she took care of everything for the case. She did ask me if I wanted to settle this out of court, but apparently Karen wanted her side of the story to be heard in a court of law. The trial came and Karen pleaded not guilty. At first I was worried, but my lawyer assured me that everything was in my favor. Videos from the attack were shown, both from security cameras and from witness phones. Karen gave her side of the story, embellishing on all of the details, so it made it seem that I'd been the one to get violent first. I was asked to speak and recount what occurred, and using the techniques my therapist taught me, I was able to keep my composure throughout my testimony. The jury did not take too long to decide and found Karen guilty on all charges, and she got in huge trouble. Never mess with a veteran. And here, Ripe stars, before we end the video, let's read another funny story from r/PettyRevenge. And by the way, let me know in the comments if you enjoyed these small, satisfying stories at the end of the video. I for one really like them, and it gives me a reason to show you more cat videos. This one is titled, "Old Lady Wanted to Be Impatient, so I Decided to Be Petty." This happened today. After going shopping at our local mall, my wife and I were putting our kids in the car as some old lady was waiting for us to pull out so she could take the parking spot. As I am putting my oldest in the car, I was talking to him about what he wanted to do for lunch. During this conversation, the lady started getting agitated and beeping her horn at us. I didn't know she was even there to begin with, but I thought, whatever. As I'm getting in the car, my wife told me that the lady must want our spot because her blinker's on. Meanwhile, she just keeps beeping. So I said, screw it, I'm leaving. Well, that is when the petty revenge kicks in. As I tried to back out, she was too close to my car, so I couldn't pull out of the spot. As I tried to move out, she kept closer to my car. I then tell my wife that I literally cannot get out because of this lady. In this entire time span, about 5 minutes have passed, I look at my wife and tell her at this point the lady could have found another spot, so since she didn't want to let me out, I make sure she finds another spot. I then pull back into the spot, park my car, and get out to walk back into the mall. The lady then speeds off from the spot while I immediately get back into my car and leave. Yes, I am petty, but you are also very impatient, Karen. And yeah guys, thank you for watching. Please don't forget to check out my playlist on the left for endless content, and I will see you again tomorrow.